You know, I got a request to do this, um, to do this video today of all things, and I thought about it, and I figured, you know what? This might be a good topic to work on. It might be. I'll talk about it anyway. Now, okay, let's take a look at what this topic is about. In fact, you can see it up there. It's about the supporters of Ian Flynn, if you will. And, you know, I'm a fan of Ian Flynn's work. I am. I know some people may have the difference of opinion on that. And, you know, that's okay. You guys can have your difference of opinion. I really don't mind at all. But, you know, what gets me is, you know, why is it they are so, the supporters of Ian, the true guy, the true people, well, not the true people, but those that support Ian. Like I said, I'm a fan of his work. I don't think he's that bad of a writer. I think he's pretty good. But those that support and defend him, that go against those that criticize his work, I think I can understand why they feel so offended sometimes, why they get enraged, why they anguish, why they look at someone like me and say, you have no respect for the guy. Why you don't, you know, they look at someone like me and say, I have no respect for the guy. Look at somebody else and say, you don't know what the guy is about. You don't know what he's got planned. And the truth is, we don't know what he's got planned, but I think I can understand why they say that to people. You see, there's a lot of fans out there that have different taste. And when somebody new, creative-wise, writing-wise, comes in and takes over, it's like you're getting a whole new start. It's like you're getting a whole new bag of goodies. Basically, it's like, let's say, you go to the grocery store and you're seeing the produce people putting out fresh vegetables and fruits. And of course, being someone that's been in grocery business before, you always put the fresh last, the oldest first. But even though you do that, people are always going to go for the fresh one because it's newer, it's fresh, it's right there, and it's ready to go. It's kind of like when you go to a deli and they make the announcements, oh, we've got fresh French bread for sale in our deli. You want to be the first there to get that fresh one instead of getting one that's already on the rack. Now, what this has to do with Ian is real simple. Ian is kind of like for the past 5 years, despite how anybody would feel about him, it's like a breath of fresh air to them, to these fans. He's a breath of fresh air. He is basically that fresh produce that's just been put out. You know, he's like that new bag of goodies that you get. He's basically something, you know, even though he's been around for 5 years, he's something new, something that they can see and enjoy, somebody that is fresh in his ideas, if you will. Now, of course, I mean, obviously, you take a look at a lot of people, you know, a lot of people will say that he's not fresh in his ideas. They'll say he copies ideas. He's done this, he's done that, and it's true, they have a right to say that. But again, for those that criticize others for being against Ian, it's more or less the fact they criticize him because to them, they're trying to tell people like, say, myself, LaserX5, Jonathan 83X, among others, Miko, XX, Natalie at times, although she's a supporter, you know, and the list can go on. They're basically trying to tell him, look, You know, Ian may not be perfect, but he's a lot better than what we've had before. And his ideas are fresh. They're different. They're original. You know, it's like when it comes to the whole Sally situation. Yeah, I've come out and I've said I don't like the fact that she's roboticized, and that's one of the reasons. I'm not opening the issue, not entirely the reason. And you'll see that in the video before. But there is an absolute reasoning to them as to why it's not a bad thing, because it's an original idea. Okay, the roboticizing Sally is not an original idea, but the way they look at it, like Ezekiel 300, the way he looks at it, it was done differently than before. And the way they look at what Eggman has done to her is original, because basically by modifying and weaponizing her, even though they have to admit they know she'll be restored to flesh and blood in the future, the thing is, when they look at her being modified and weaponized, they say that they look at that as a fresh and original idea, because when she was previously roboticized, did Robotnik do that? No. Does Eggman do it? Yes. He does it because it basically makes him more of a threat, and they like that. It's fresh, it's original. It's something that, as they would put, Ken Penders and Carl Bowlers and anybody else that's came before them has not thought of. Of course they wouldn't have thought of it, you know. It's Ian Flynn. But the point I'm trying to get at is this is one of the reasons they like Ian Flynn. This is why when people criticize Ian's work, they get angry. They defend him. Now, I'm not saying they haven't come out and faulted Ian on some of the things he's done. They have. But they've also come out by saying, hey, even when they call him out on some of his faults, they say, hey, look, we know you're trying, but what you're doing doesn't make sense here, but it does make sense here. It's like let's say when the person that created this, the OVA of Super Mario Brothers, when the person created this, they probably said, well, this scene works better here, but this scene doesn't make no sense. I don't know why you have it in here. And people have criticized that. See what I'm saying? What I'm saying is that to them, yeah, Ian will have his faults. Like, to them, maybe he'll have like 5 faults out of a comic that they'll give maybe, I don't know, a 90 out of 100, a 9 out of 10 out of, or 9.5 out of 10, or an 8.5 out of 10. But they will find the faults. They won't just come out and say, oh, well, you didn't do anything bad. It was a perfect issue. They do find faults, and they let Ian know about it. I mean, they even come out and defend the fact that Ian sometimes is not at fault for certain things. Ian said in his interview that he did a few weeks ago with Segabits that a lot of his ideas concerning the Gamecast were his ideas. Now, a lot of people, including myself, have come out and have pretty much agreed with it, but have also kind of said, well, is it really all his idea? Or is he just saying that to throw us off and not let us know it's really Sega's idea? We don't know. But when he comes out on national podcast radio and says that it's his ideas, you got to take his word for it. And of course, I do agree. One of the things about a head writer is they got to throw you off course. They got to make sure you don't figure out exactly what's going to happen. I'm just checking my time there, even though I have an unlimited time limit, from what I understand. But they look at it and they say, they basically look at it and they're like, you got to take his word for it. You can't, you got to take his word for it, and you got to, just believe he's telling the truth. Now, I can understand that, and I get that. But when people go against that and they say, oh, it's not really Ian's fault, he's just doing what Sega's telling him, yeah, Ian's supporters, fans, they'll criticize. Even when somebody over at the DeviantArt account comes out and posts a picture, a JPEG, a GPEG, a JPEG, if you will, of one of the responses he did with a fan after he did that journal a few weeks ago, that explanation journal. He basically stated, and you can find this on DeviantArt if you don't believe me, but he basically stated that he's even stated, from what this fan posted, and I have to believe this, but I have to, because I read it myself, that he doesn't like the fact that doesn't like the fact that Sega has these mandates, because he can't work his magic, if you will, with the characters that need to be magicized, if you will, or developed. Basically, when he listed down what Sega said, or what some of the restrictions or mandates, basically, in a sense, like he said, I read this, in a sense, he's saying, look, if it wasn't for Sega doing this to me, I'd be able to take Amy Rose. I'd be able to take Sonic. I'd be able to take Tails, Knuckles, Blaze, Rouge, Shadow, Cream, Big, Vanilla, the Chaotix. I'd be able to go and I'd be able to basically develop them as much as I want. But because of the mandates, they can't be. I mean, it's like the whole relationship deal. He's always, people get on him. One of the things that the supporters, the fans of Ian Flynn, criticize and argue against those that are against him is that, basically it's the pairing deal, it's the shipping deal. Now, Ian has come out and said he doesn't like the shipping deal, but he has come out and said, hey, if a romance happens, let it happen. And, Ian, basically is saying that, hey, if I want to put Sonic with Sally in the story, even though it won't be temporary, even though it won't be permanent, hey, you got to let it flow. Or if I'm going to do it with Amy, you got to let it flow. That's basically what it is. And some supporters of him have agreed with that. They have agreed. And, they'll take a look at people that are against him and blame him for what's going on, and they'll say, look, you don't know what he's got planned. And after that, you don't know what he's going to do with this pairing or that pairing, or what kind of romance he's going to put in the book. You don't know that. And then one of the biggest criticizations, and this is, again, going back to that statement, let me look at the time here, but this is going back to that statement that, like I said, is on DeviantArt, on the explanation journal, on his account. He basically says, look, and he said this even I think in his interview and a few other things, that the reason he couldn't do as much with the Sega cast is because one, Sonic can't lose. That's why you had that quick turnaround in the 175 three-part story arc. Sonic can't lose. They can never age. They can never differ that much from the personalities. So basically, what does that do? That leaves the door wide open for the original Satayam cast and the comic book cast to be dealt with and used in any way he can. Basically, what these supporters of Ian are trying to do, they're trying to say, look, as much as, look, what he's doing with the characters right now, what he's doing with your Bunnies and your Antoines and your Rotors and your Sallys and this and that, the reason he's using them more so and basically exploiting them more so than the other characters and the game characters is because of the restrictions. Basically what he's doing to them, he wants to do to those game characters, but he can't. That's why before he came on board and he did Other M, I'm sure he looks back on it and he may say, and you got to believe him, I guess, that he doesn't like what he did with Other M. But basically he looks back at that and he looks at that and he probably thinks to himself now, wow, I am so glad I got all of that out of my system before I came on board. Because if he was to try something like that in the comic now, he wouldn't be able to get away with it. I mean, why do you think he said quick turnaround for 175, 177? It's because the effect that he wanted didn't work, And having Sonic lose was not what Sega wanted. I mean, basically what it sounds like to me, is that, and fans defend him on this, is that, everything that goes on in the comics sometimes, some of the events, are not totally his fault. And that because of the fact that Sega basically wants the comic to be like, oh, I don't know, a level of the game, a level of a game or something like that, it restricts him. It restricts him. And maybe it does. Maybe it does restrict him, but we don't know. But you know what? Where there's a positive, there's always a silver lining. Now, we all know he's not going to keep Sally roboticized forever. He's going to restore her. We know eventually he's going to bring the freedom fighters back together. We know that. Basically, right now, this is what I looked at, and I talked about this before. I think I talked about it in a video before, but this is the way I look at it. There's a pattern to Ian Flynn's, I guess you could say his madness, but there's a pattern. You see, even before Ian Flynn came on board, I think there was a pattern. And you know what that pattern is, folks? You know what that pattern is? I'll tell you what it is. That pattern goes like this. 125. Now, I know it started before this, but this is the way I look at it. 125, or every 50 issues, from the last anniversary issue to the upcoming ones or whatever. Like 125, you had everybody involved. 50 issues later, only the game cast was, the ones saving the day and defending the planet and do the rescuing. Okay? 25 issues later, everybody was involved. 25 issues after that, everybody was involved. 50 issues from 200 to now, Sega characters. So I think basically the silver lining with Ian, and I'm sure a lot of supporters will agree on this, whether they want to agree with it or not, is he's probably going to dedicate the 20th anniversary year of the comic book, as well as, if you want to look at it in a technicality kind of way, the 20th anniversary of this. He's going to take those 20th anniversaries and he's going to put, for at least maybe 25 issues, maybe more, a focus on these characters to celebrate 20 years. That's why probably right now they're doing the whole situation. And if that's the silver lining, not saying that it is, then hey, you've got to give him credit. If that's the direction he's going in. And that's what some fans are always arguing towards other fans about. It's like you don't give him a chance. You don't know what he's got planned. And that's why they criticize those like myself that sometimes will either, with me, I'll read off some people's rants. Like I read off Hamilton 27's rant, and, and things like that, and stuff like that. And, people will be against that. Hey, basically they're trying to say is give him a chance. Look what he's done. You just don't see it. I mean, Ezekiel 300, he keeps telling me, hey, you don't see the silver lining. You don't see what he did with Sally. He basically took all the shit that Ken Penders and Carl Bowlers put on her and had her redeem herself through all that by sacrificing herself to robotization. And you know what? I do agree. That probably was a good thing on Ian Flynn's part. I agree on that. I totally agree. But there will be those that will look at what Ezekiel 300 keeps telling me and then everybody else and say, yeah, that might be good, but look what he's done to her now. But they always keep saying one thing, and I hate to say this, but I do agree with them. And this is one thing they criticize against those like myself, but I hate to, and I agree with them on this. The lower the low for the heroes, the greater the victory. So, to me, this is why Ian's supporters and his fans are upset and they criticize those like myself and others that may have a difference of opinion of his work or not. So, that's all I'm going to say on it, folks. Comment down below, tell me what you think, and I'll talk to you all later.